The end of May may feel like standing at the edge of a rapidly changing horizon. Over the past couple of weeks, we've watched Gemini season begin activating Uranus in Gemini for the first real time. And now the atmosphere is unmistakably accelerating. Conversations are moving faster, new ideas are arriving suddenly, and collective attention is shifting quickly beneath excitement, uncertainty, innovation, and overwhelm. Yet beneath all of that movement, this final week of May asks an important question. What are we actually building with all of this momentum? Welcome back to Onas Astrology. I'm Mariana, and today we are exploring the astrology of Monday, May 25th through Sunday, May 31st of 2026. This is also a beautiful week to spend some time exploring the dial over at dial.onescence.com. We've got several major transits this week, and that'll help to reveal how the atmosphere is transforming both visually and energetically in real time. If you're interested, you can follow the sun moving deeper into Gemini, Mars squaring Pluto, Venus squaring Saturn, and Sagittarius Full Moon that's arriving at the very end of the month as our blue moon. And the dial will also let you to pull up the weekly forecast directly while also tracking the larger seasonal story that's unfolding around these activations. That being said, this week is going to begin with intensity almost immediately. So late last night, moving into today, Tuesday the 26th, we saw Mars in Taurus squaring Pluto in Aquarius, while the Sun in Gemini is simultaneously forming a trine with Pluto only a few hours later. So this creates one of the most psychologically charged moments, I think, of the whole month. Mars in Taurus really wants stability, security, embodiment, and tangible control over physical reality. Pluto in Aquarius continues reshaping collective systems, technology, social structures, and power dynamics far beneath the surface. So when Mars and Pluto clash through a square like this while in these signs, the pressure tends to surface around control, resistance, frustration, power struggles, exhaustion, or maybe even the feeling that something deeper is forcing transformation, whether we feel ready or not. Now, this can absolutely show up externally through collective tensions, technology disruptions, political friction, or confrontations around value and resources. Yet, internally, this transit often reveals where we are gripping too tightly to outdated forms of stability simply because they feel familiar. So, what makes this especially interesting is that the Sun in Gemini simultaneously trines Pluto in Aquarius later that same day, right? So, while the Mars square Pluto can feel emotionally intense or reactive, we're now coming into the energy where the Sun is trining Pluto and offering some perspective, awareness, and the ability to consciously engage with whatever this transformation might be for us rather than merely resisting it. So expect it. If it has been a little bit difficult last night into this morning, it should start to lighten up, and you should be receiving some of the insights that maybe help you to take those steps forward again. This is really incredibly powerful astrology, especially for insight, honest conversations. Psychological breakthroughs could really happen, and also the recognizing of larger patterns that are unfolding collectively is very likely as well. Now, moving on, we don't see another aspect until Thursday, May 28th, and the emotional atmosphere is going to become softer at that time, albeit maybe more complicated with Venus in Cancer squaring Saturn in Aries. Venus in Cancer desires emotional closeness, reassurance, safety, tenderness, and belonging. Saturn in Aries asks for maturity, accountability, boundaries, and personal responsibility. So under this 10th square, many people may feel the tension between emotional needs and emotional reality. Loneliness, relational uncertainty, vulnerability, or fears surrounding intimacy and trust could really rise closer to the surface during that time. Also, this aspect could be helping to strengthen relationships that are rooted in genuine emotional maturity rather than fantasy or projection. So it's not all tense, right? Saturn does not necessarily deny connection, but it does ask us to build it honestly and sustainably. Then by the weekend, the atmosphere opens considerably as we experience our full moon in Sagittarius arriving early on Sunday, May 31st. And before we dive into that, I do want to note that I find these tense squares bringing opportunity for challenge, revelation, maybe some triggers coming right after we saw Uranus and the Sun conjunct in Gemini on last Friday. Now, I kind of saw that as the activation of Uranus in Gemini that day and well into the weekend. The energy was noticeably different for me. I am highly sensitive, but I'm not picking up on things that aren't there. So it has made me curious as to how maybe this has been affecting other people. But to see these squares come in right after, I kind of see it as the universe giving us the opportunity to shake things up. It doesn't want this energy to go unused. Uranus in Gemini is not something that every generation or every person will experience. And so, how are we going to make the best of this? How are we going to make the most of the abilities that we have during this profound transit? Well, it's not going to be by sitting comfortable in the same things that we have grown to be coddled by. And so these disruptions, though they may not be what we want to hear is coming down the line, could very well be exactly what we need in order to progress in the ways that ultimately lead us towards our goals. So please keep that in mind as we're going through these more challenging aspects in the beginning of the week. Now, after several weeks dominated by Gemini activations, this full moon helps to widen our perspective again on Sunday. Sagittarius, being the sign that counters Gemini, really reminds us to kind of zoom out and reconnect with meaning, direction, philosophy, vision, and the larger story that's unfolding around our lives. Gemini gathers information. Sagittarius, though, is asking what the information actually means. So, certainly an interesting lunation and probably one of the more intense Sagittarius full moons that we'll have, given all of this activation of Gemini and how Sagittarius, being its counterpart, needs to come in to ground that, right? So with all of the potential overwhelm, with all of the enhancements in communication and technology moving faster, perhaps the answer isn't to get it all, to somehow figure out how to digest it all. The answer is to go into the meaning, to find what resonates with you, and to start curating the type of information that you're dealing with. You are not responsible for everything. I am not responsible for everything. And if we can each focus on that which we are responsible for, we open up more opportunities to experience life as it's meant to be for us, not as an egoic hero who needs to solve everybody's problems and ends up avoiding the deepest of their own in the process. So let yourself settle, let yourself find grounding in what's meaningful to you. It doesn't have to make sense to everybody else, but it is your responsibility if it is something that is coming through in your own awareness. So just want to point that out. The lunation may also bring some realizations surrounding the future, education, travel, belief systems, media, spirituality, publishing, personal direction, all of those things that Sagittarius really loves. Emotionally, many people might feel a strong sense of desire to step back from the constant mental stimulation and to really reconnect with that clarity, wisdom, and lived experience that Sagittarius embodies, rather than just endless noise for noise's sake, right? Now, later on Sunday evening, we also see Mercury in Gemini sextiling Chiron in Aries. This is helping to close out the month on a more healing and communicative note. Conversations that maybe felt difficult earlier in the month could begin opening up more naturally as we close it out. There is some space for honesty, space for insight, space for realizing that our vulnerability and intelligence do not need to exist separately from one another, okay? So overall, this final week of May, it really feels like the bridge between activation and integration. And the signal that went out this month through Uranus entering Gemini, and especially being activated by the Sun's conjunction with Uranus just this past week, I really feel we're only going to now begin to understand what all of that rapid mental energy is about, as well as that the acceleration alone isn't enough. Wisdom still matters, discernment still matters, emotional grounding still matters. So we have to be willing to kind of adjust our expectations of success and fulfillment in order to meet the parameters of reality. Is arbitrary achievement really providing the satisfaction that we want, or have we deluded ourselves into believing a narrative that is not really true for us? I know, we couldn't leave it easy, right? The future is arriving quickly, but I love astrology because it helps to remind us that how we participate in that future matters just as much as the change itself, maybe even more. If you'd like to follow these transits visually and explore the larger patterns unfolding across the season, please visit the dial at dial.onessence.com. You could also find different resources, articles, seasonal guidance, and other things at onessence.com in and of itself. That's ONESCENCE.com. Thank you so much for spending time with me here on Ona's Astrology. Until next time, stay grounded, stay curious, and take care of yourselves, even as the world continues to change around us. Okay? It's important. Always. Maybe now more than ever. So, thank you. Take care. Blessed be. And I will see you next week with your June forecast.